Good evening. Welcome to Science Night Out. It's great to see so many of you here. For us at the Knight campus, this annual event has always been about sharing our work and connecting science and innovation to the broader community. And this year feels especially meaningful. Tonight, we're celebrating 10 years of the Knight campus, 10 years of Science Night Out, and 10 years of pursuing our mission of science advancing society. So let me start with a simple question. What does science advancing society actually mean? At the Knight campus, it means accelerating the pace at which discoveries move out of the lab and into the world. It means working in collaborative teams because the problems that we're working on are too complex for one individual or one discipline. It means persistently pursuing excellence. Excellence not just in discovery, but in how we translate those discoveries. It also means being distinctively Oregon, rooted in a bold pioneering attitude, if you will, to build something new no matter what the challenges. But most importantly, it means opening doors and changing lives both for those doing the work and for those the work ultimately serves. Tonight, you will hear from 4 innovative researchers, 2 who came to the Knight campus as faculty members and 2 who entered as graduate students. Together, they have been working relentlessly to drive new technologies into the world to improve human health. Because at our core, the Knight campus is use-inspired. We don't just ask, what can we discover? We ask, what problems can we solve? And how quickly can we solve them? How can we contribute meaningful outcomes for the well-being of society? We build technologies and we translate ideas, bringing disciplines together in new ways designed for impact. And you'll see examples of that throughout the program tonight. Now, if you've been to a Knight campus presentation before, you probably have heard us refer to the impact cycle. This is basically a simple illustration of the complex process of creating real-world applications out of scientific discoveries. Now, traditionally, academic research has moved from discovery to development to deployment as a new application or product in the market. But we know that making a discovery and only then looking for an application isn't the only or perhaps even the best approach. Sometimes starting with a need, an unmet clinical challenge, or a critical technology gap is a more successful innovation strategy. In these cases, it's the need that drives discovery. And in either case, translation into impact inevitably generates more questions for discovery, and the cycle continues. Now, over the past 10 years, our drive to get to meaningful outcomes quickly has already begun to pay off. The foundation we've laid at the Knight campus is producing impact now. But our impact will only continue to grow through the programs we are creating, the students we are training, the world-class facilities we are investing in, and the culture of innovation we are nurturing that will yield benefits to the university, the state of Oregon, and society for generations to come. We've started to build something unique and outstanding, and now we're entering the next chapter. Knight Campus Building 2 has opened and welcomed its first occupants as of March 2026. This is a major milestone for us and for the University of Oregon. The new building doubles our capacity to bring together bioengineering and biomedical data science research with maker spaces for training and more incubator spaces for startup companies. Now, when you come and look at this campus, I hope you will see more than just the infrastructure in the buildings. You'll see what really defines the Knight campus, which is our community. When buildings 1 and 2 are full, we'll have approximately 750 people calling this campus home. Something that was just a hope and a dream in 2016 to the UO scientist who pitched this idea first to the university president and then to our very generous benefactors, Penny and Phil Knight. And not only is our community of people rapidly growing, but we're becoming global, drawing talent from all over the world to Eugene to be part of what we're building here. In fact, we can proudly say that our faculty and students now hail from 6 continents. Every corner of the globe is represented here, except one. We're stepping up our recruiting efforts in Antarctica. Our newest bioengineering faculty, Dr. Sarah Keller and Dr. David Peeler, arrived earlier this year from Oxford University and are already building the talented teams that will staff their labs. Like all of our faculty, they chose to come here because of what this community represents: scientists and innovators who are committed to excellence and moving ideas into application. And we're not just doing that in the lab, but this ethos also extends to how we're building our academic programs, which are producing the next generation workforce with proficiency in high priority technical skills, but also very intentionally trained in bioethics, entrepreneurship, and science communication. Our graduates are going on to incredible placements across academia, industry, and startups, including our first bioengineering PhD graduate, Kylie Williams, who you will hear from tonight. Now, in addition to the early success of our bioengineering graduates, our industry-focused master's program, the Night Campus Graduate Internship Program, or KCGIP, continues to flourish as a national model, creating meaningful opportunities and high-wage jobs for Oregonians. One example I want to highlight tonight is the Oregon Pathways to Industry Research Careers Pipeline, launched through a $4.3 million National Science Foundation grant, one of the largest of its kind at the time, and joined by over $1 million in state of Oregon support. Built in partnership with industry, state, and federal agencies, this program creates a path for community college students to be supported financially and academically to move through advanced training and receive a bachelor's degree at the University of Oregon, and then pursue an industry-focused master's degree, expanding access for Oregonians to enter into successful science and engineering careers and strengthening Oregon's workforce. We're also expanding into areas like semiconductors, which you all know is a rapidly advancing industry, by aligning our training with regional workforce needs. Our students are so well prepared that companies like Qorvo, Analog, and Intel are eager to hire them and have even adjusted their hiring practices accordingly. As one industry partner put it, there are KCGIP students and then there's everybody else. And that's because of the hands-on and professional training that they get. On the research side, the impact is just as exciting. I've mentioned this is a year of milestones in the Knight campus. This year also marks 5 years of the WUSI Human Performance Alliance. Because of this alliance, Oregon is on the global map for sport and human performance, leading to our co-founding of the Global Sport University Network, or GSUN. This is a collective of universities from around the world that aggregates sport-related research and expertise from every discipline to address topics that no one institution could fully address on its own. Human performance in sport is just one example of how the work we are doing not only attracts great talent, but enables us to build national and global partnerships. We're also building strengths and partnerships in other areas like regenerative medicine, neuroengineering, synthetic biology, and biomedical data science. In each of these areas, the Knight campus is creating previously unimagined technologies and translating them into impact. Now tonight you're going to hear about 2 of those emerging technologies from our researchers. You'll hear about implantable sensors and ultra-small scale 3D printing. These are really remarkable advances, but I hope you appreciate what matters is not just the technological advancement, but really the human health challenges that they're addressing. And of course, the translational journey of our innovators striving to make a difference. Which brings me back to innovation, central to the Knight campus way and a driving force behind societal impact and economic opportunity. The new technologies being developed are not staying in the lab or limited to just a research publication. They are becoming licensed technologies in startup companies, launched right here through the Pape Family Innovation Center. In fact, one of them has already outgrown the incubator space that we can provide, which is exactly the kind of problem that we like to have. And that company, Pandaria Technologies, you'll hear from tonight, is going to continue their growth right here in Oregon. Now, behind these stories of these new companies is an even broader ecosystem. Faculty startups like the ones shown, but also student and trainee startups, such as Clearmark Biosciences, a rapid concussion biosensor company launched by Knight campus undergraduate students, and SocoLife, a regenerative biomaterials company developed by Knight campus postdoctoral fellow Natalia Shatkina. In addition, we've supported UVO startups like Key Biome, Northwest Prevention Sciences, and a growing network of current and former tenants in the Pape Family Innovation Center. We've also built partnerships with Launch Oregon, an early-stage investment organization created within the UO Foundation, working to turn Oregon's innovations into commercial success, and the UO Lundquist College of Business, creating a graduate specialization in entrepreneurship and innovation that's available now to any U of O PhD student. Collectively, the impact of innovation extends far beyond the campus. It shows up in economic development, in the companies we're launching, in the workforce we're training, and the talent we're attracting and retaining here in Oregon. Our industry partnerships are absolutely essential to this work, from companies that collaborate on research, to those that host the KC GIP interns, to partners like Nike and others in the Woosai Human Performance Alliance. There are over 200 companies that we have worked with, leading to a dramatic uptick in the diversity of funding sources and making us more resilient. These relationships are what make our model work, and the impact is measurable. In fiscal year 2024, according to an external economic development report, the Knight campus contributed over $160 million in economic impact to the state. That's remarkable after just 10 years. And that's a reflection of the research activity, partnerships, and the growing innovation ecosystem we're building together. We're also proud to play a role in broader regional efforts, serving as an anchor for the Southern Willamette Innovation Corridor Initiative and helping to drive the statewide Life Sciences Task Force. And I want to take a moment to thank the many partners and distinguished guests from these groups who are here with us tonight. We're so grateful for your collaboration on advancing our mutual goals of improving the health of Oregonians and increasing prosperity across the state. Now, as we celebrate 10 years tonight, we're not just looking back, we're looking ahead, because we've only just begun to realize the impact of the foundation being laid today and the coalition of statewide efforts to promote innovation and economic prosperity. Science Night Out has always been about sharing what we do with our community. So tonight, I invite you to imagine what's possible. As you hear from our speakers, join them on their journeys of tracing a path from societal need to an innovative solution. Ask yourself what problems we can solve together, and maybe even begin to dream of the potential solutions. Because the next decade of the Knight campus is just getting started, and it's gatherings like this that will help us bring that future into focus. Now, following tonight's presentations, all four of the speakers are going to join me on the stage for a live Q&A. Your questions can help drive that conversation. I'll get to as many of them as I possibly can. So please note the number on the screen here and text your questions anytime throughout the talk. And I'll also ask if you, while you have your phones out, go ahead and put them on silent. So thank you very much for being here. And it's now my pleasure to introduce our first speakers, Paul Dalton and Iman von Briesen. So let me tell you a little bit about them. All right, so Professor Paul Dalton is the Bradshaw and Holzapfel Research Professor in Transformational Science and Mathematics, Associate Professor of Bioengineering at the Knight campus, and co-founder of the startup company Vivotex. He pioneered and developed melt electrowriting, a high-precision 3D printing technology that builds microscopic scaffolds mimicking the natural matrix that supports cells in human tissue. I know that sounds like science fiction, but it's not. And the applications span from making bone, nerve repair, cancer research, and drug discovery. Paul's path to Eugene has been a global one, from Australia, Toronto, England, China, and Germany, where he became the first biofabrication professor in the country and introduced melt-to-electrowriting in Europe. The technology has since spread to dozens of laboratories and has been incorporated into bioprinters by multiple companies worldwide. Paul joined the Knight campus in 2021, and he co-founded Vivatex to bring precision-designed scaffolds from the lab to the broader biomedical research community. Now, joining Paul is Iman von Briesen, a bioengineering PhD student in the Dalton lab, whose work is making melt-to-electrowriting more affordable and accessible to research labs around the world. A mechanical engineering graduate of Duke University, Iman's lifelong passion for 3D printing has evolved into a focus on medical technology, work recognized by her award, a very prestigious award, by the National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship. Now, tonight, they'll share how this technology is moving from discovery into the world. So please join me in welcoming Professor Paul Dalton and Iman von Briesen.
Thank you very much, Bob. As the second building of the Knight campus was being built, you can see the scaffold that's put in place so that workers can access the site. But what if we could build scaffolds at the scale of living tissue so that cellular workers can help repair and regenerate skin, heart, and spinal cord? That's what our team, a mix of neuroscientists and engineers, is working on. And our scaffolds are made from the same plastics that are used in sutures. So if you've ever done anything dangerous, then these dissolvable plastics have probably been used on you to close your wounds. As a way of introduction, I grew up in a rural part of Western Australia, and I loved reading books. I would be found anywhere, everywhere, reading books, even spending hours on the back of my favourite pet cow, reading books while he happily grazed away in the fields. And through this reading, I became a science junkie, just fascinated in how this incredible world works. I was also a fan of science fiction movies and TV. American shows like Superman and MacGyver come to mind. And it inspired me to do good deeds and to be resourceful on the farm. So I was shocked when Christopher Reeve, the Superman who I think is the original one, was a quadriplegic after a horse riding accident in 1995. I mean, if that can happen to Superman, it can happen to any one of us. And so I was profoundly saddened, and I dedicated my postdoc and future years in actually learning more and working in spinal cord injury research labs, understanding more about this terrible affliction. And this is actually one of the true privileges of working in biomedical research, to dedicate and commit yourself to a disease or injury so you can help the people suffering from it. And the mission, Science Advancing Society, is really something that resonated with me and was a large part of me moving my lab from Germany to Oregon in 2021. So for someone who loves everything technical, it was no wonder that I was going to end up in 3D printing. And for those, as you may know, 3D printing is where you get a hot plastic and you push it through a nozzle onto a collector, and you do it over and over again to make an object. But the problem with 3D printing is the resolution. If you look at what it makes, it's nothing like us. Our cells, tissue, the exquisite architecture of the human body is far, far finer than what a 3D printer can make. So I was actually fascinated by how weird things happen when you apply voltages to liquids. And so what you're seeing now is pure deionized water stabilized by high voltage. This is a curiosity of physics that was never used for anything important. And it works because you put charges, all the charges aggregate around the column edge, and it stops that pinching from happening that results in water droplet formation. And so instead of water, I used hot plastic melts that you normally use in 3D printing. So here you see a liquid plastic jet that's pulled down from the nozzle onto the collector where it becomes a fiber, and it's much, much smaller than the nozzle. And the magic sauce, or the secret sauce, is how we print at low flow rates, microliters an hour. And in probably one of the weirdest analogies I'm going to say tonight, we're printing at about 1/10 a teardrop per hour, right? So very, very low flow rates. And we want to make these fibers at the same size as cells, because if cells want to make this like home, then they need to have the architecture around them. Now, this is the first microfiber printer built in the world, and in context, I was working in a neuroimmunology lab doing spinal cord injury research, and I had zero budget for doing crazy stuff like 3D printing on the side. And so I got an old heater, and actually this is a glass blowing thing that the syringe went into, and they are textbooks that are raising the height to the right level. Now, stolen is a strong word. So temporarily borrowing a microscope stage from a perfectly good microscope that no one was using on the weekends. And I manually moved the stage back and forth to collect the microfibers and even nanofibers. And look, it wasn't perfect, but it showed that it would work. And now this technology is used in about 100 labs around the world and growing. So when we make things... Thank you. So when we make small fibers, we can make small things from that. So here you see like a little nerve guide that's designed to regenerate the nerves in a finger. In fact, you can apply this to any part of the body, and you can try and recreate the anatomical structure through printing scaffolds that kind of mimic that general approximation. I mentioned before the privilege of being able to research diseases, but this one's personal. My stepfather was diagnosed with a brain tumor and quickly passed away from this terrible disease. And so together with a graduate student here at the Knight campus, we've designed a migration assay to understand what cancer cells move faster, and these are the ones in green. The microfibers are there designed to mimic blood vessels, which we know cancer cells move along. And so this can let us understand like what makes some cancers more devastating than others, and also maybe being a potential screening tool. So there are many things that we can work on, and I think our superpower as a lab is collaboration, and the catalyst for the collaboration are graduate students. So I'd like to introduce you to one graduate student who builds printers and makes scaffolds. Can everyone please welcome Iman to the stage?
Thank you, Paul. So if we imagine the tissues in our body as these complex 3D structures designed to serve a particular purpose, there are a few different things that we need to think about as we design structures to replicate our tissues and to support regeneration of the tissue or modeling it outside of the body. So if we think about building 2 of Knight campus, which has come up quite a bit, the designers of this building had to think about similar things as it was being designed and built, such as the overall shape. What kind of footprint is it taking up? How many people and labs does it need to house? The different sizes that are involved. Are the ceilings tall enough? Can everything fit inside? Do we have enough places to attach all of our research equipment? As well as the material. We want to make sure that we're building this structure out of something that's not going to collapse as it holds the full capacity of the building, and some other things. So these are all considerations that we keep in mind as we design microfiber scaffolds for specific tissue engineering or tissue applications. So in the center here, we see a very simple geometry that we use a lot for prototyping and is actually also quite useful for areas where compressive loading is necessary, like with the meniscus. And it's just this normal box structure like what you would see if an apartment was being built. And we are also able to create much more intricate structures. One of the biggest advantages of the microfiber printing we do is the ability to precisely control the direction of the print head and where the fiber is being deposited. So with that, we can do some pretty cool things. On the right here, we see what's called an auxetic lattice, which means that when it's stretched, it actually expands. And that kind of design could be really useful for something like the heart, where we're repeatedly inflating and contracting over and over and over again to pump our blood. So that way the scaffold and implant could deform with the heart and return back to its original position. We're also able to make minute changes from layer to layer just by shifting the path a little bit. We can add tilts to our walls. So instead of having these straight up and down walls, we can have more curved walls like we see on the left. And that can lead to some really interesting mechanical properties, which are useful for tissues like the tendon or ligament, where there are nonlinear mechanical behaviors. So at the macro scale, we have a lot of freedom in the design space for these scaffolds that we can think about as we design different structures for different applications. Now, if we zoom in a little bit to the fiber itself, as Paul mentioned, we print really small things. If you imagine that the size of the average human hair is about the size of this scale bar, we can easily go over 10 times smaller than that. And that is a really unique ability of our technology, and it's the biggest advantage of it because we're able to really print at the scale of the cells we are trying to engage with and support as they go through restructuring or healing. Now here we can see a few different sizes ranging from the size of a skin cell to smaller than the body of a small neuron. And we can actually also change this fiber diameter during a print by just changing the amount of pressure that's being supplied to the polymer that we're printing with. So we could design really complicated structures with all sorts of geometries like I showed you in the previous slide, as well as different fibers for different purposes to ultimately create this complex structure to mimic something in the human body. But beyond our geometric freedom and the size of the fibers we print, the material we use is also very, very important to consider. On the left here, we see a more inelastic material, which when stretched actually starts to fail. Even though none of the fibers snap, it does not return into its original position. And on the right, we see a more elastic material, which can be deformed and returns back to its original position once it's released. Now, I recently got some titanium enhancements to my ankle. Titanium is great at great for bone applications because it's very strong. It can withstand me walking around all day. It's also a little bit compliant, so I'm not too worried about it just snapping randomly. But it's not so great for something like the muscle, which is consistently being loaded and unloaded and stretched and unstretched. So we have to think about printing with a more elastic material. We also know that our cells are somewhat sensitive to the properties of the material that we're printing with. My bone actually integrates pretty well with titanium. It's not perfect, but it's like good enough. But when we see other softer tissues engaging with harder or stiffer materials, there are actually many challenges that come along with that. One of the biggest challenges that we see with neural probes, for example, is that the brain can recognize that this is a stiffer material than the natural tissue is, and there starts to be more scarring and ultimately rejection of the implant. So as we design materials and scaffolds for the tissue's specific needs, we have to take into account what we're printing with, how we're printing with it, and how big it is. Now, there are a lot of different directions we can go with this technology. There are many things that we have done with it, and there's even more left to do. And how do we really cultivate the innovation that's necessary to take this to the next level, to really maximize the impact that this kind of 3D printing can have in biomedical engineering, medical applications, and everywhere else? So before I get into how we actually approached that, I'm going to go back about 15 years. I guess it gives it away, right? So this is my dad's Honda Odyssey with 2 3D printers in the back. And these are old school. These are pretty scrappy. They're made of parts that you can buy off the shelf or that were 3D printed by other 3D printers. So these are what's called RepRap printers. It stands for reproducing rapidly. And that was actually a huge movement at the time. It was a global effort to improve the affordability and accessibility of household printers. And pretty much all household printers looked like this. So 15 years later, we can go online, maybe to Bamboo if you're familiar with that, and buy a really nice printer for $300 that can print with multiple materials, print at a really high quality, and also is way faster than anything they could imagine at that time. And the reason that we can do that now is because of the efforts of people like my dad and his buddies who were building these RepRap printers and creating this community around them to consistently iterate and expand and customize and share their knowledge with each other. So when I went to college, I discovered that I wanted to go into engineering and medicine and 3D printing, and I didn't really know how all of these things were going to fit together. And then I learned about Paul's work with the microfiber scaffolds. And also it just kind of makes sense that I ended up in his lab, considering the original 3D printers in my life. So I moved to Oregon. And also, when Paul told me about the work in his lab to develop an open source microfiber printing technology, that was the final straw. I was like, okay, yeah, I have to join his lab. That is great. That is what I'm all about, lowering the barrier of entry, designing affordable systems that everyone can use and that'll have like a huge impact. And just to touch on open source a little bit, if you're not familiar with what it is, you probably still use it. Firefox, Signal, and WordPress are all really classic examples of open source platforms. And open source hardware works in a similar way. Basically, anyone who wants to has free and unrestricted access to all of the software that they need to run the printer, the assembly instructions to build it on their own, as well as the 3D printing files so that they can print the different components. So this is actually a much newer version of those same RepRap printers that my dad was building 15 years ago. So it's going strong, and there's a lot happening in that area. And one of the advantages that we found in the lab, and a lot of other people elsewhere, is the customizability of these systems. Because you have the resources that you need to build it all yourself, you also have everything you need to change it and make it do other things. So we took this printer. The kit can be bought for, or at the time could be bought for $700 online. And we just made a few minor modifications to keep the high voltage that Paul mentioned earlier from electrocuting the entire thing. And with that, we're able to do microfiber 3D printing for less than $1,000. Now, for reference, the commercial systems that Bob was mentioning earlier are all over $40,000 to purchase. So that was a huge barrier of entry to the field, but by developing a system like this or converting other open source printers, we were able to lower that and allow researchers who were interested in it but didn't want to spend $100,000 on a printer to try it out, or to even let ourselves try out a bunch of new things, because this way you can build a different printer for each thing. So this is an example of one of the printers. This is actually my printer, and it's about that big. And one of the breakthroughs that we've made in our lab is the ability to 3D print microfiber or nylon microfibers. Nylon's historically challenging to print really small fibers from, but it's great because it is much stronger than the suture polymer, the polymers used for sutures that Paul mentioned earlier. Another really cool thing we've done with this system is installed a frozen collector. So we could print silk microfibers, which have amazing tensile properties and are also very friendly for cells. Because they're a natural polymer, they integrate pretty well. Another major modification that's been made is adding 2 different dimensions for printing more complicated anatomical structures, like the cornea or a branched blood vessel. And personally, I use this printer on the left for all of my PhD research with 3D printing polydioxanone. One of those polymers is used in resorbable sutures. And that actually wouldn't have been possible without this version of the technology. And here we can see what it looks like when I take a fluorescently modified polymer that I print with and add some cells and see them grow and attach. And it's great for visualization, and we're looking into how they organize around my fibers as they degrade. Now, this microfiber printing technique has been adopted globally in a lot of different places for a lot of different reasons. Just a few examples. One is from a collaboration with a hospital in Germany, where we're seeding multiple types of spinal cord cells on a scaffold and seeing how they migrate and interact with each other for future spinal cord regeneration applications. Another great example of the anatomical complexity of our scaffolds came out of Australia, where a heart valve, a fully synthetic heart valve, was produced from these microfibers to circumvent the limitations of organ donation and tissue explants. And lastly, this is actually a collaboration I've had the privilege of being involved in, and it was to create a reinforcement structure for a heart patch. So I printed a degradable structure that they could then put their gel on, which is intended to release drugs into the heart. So those are just a few examples of where this is being applied, what it's being used for, and our open source platform will only add to that. And another example, I'd really like to highlight to drive it home, like how cool this thing is and how useful it can be, is out of a collaboration between the Dalton Lab and L'Oreal, the cosmetics company. And we printed a microfiber scaffold with a very intentional design and a membrane on top. And L'Oreal was really interested in this because they've stopped using animals a long time ago for their research for testing cosmetics or modeling diseases, but they're looking for different ways to speed up the process or make it more reproducible. And with this model, they were able to culture two different types of cells at the same time and speed up the overall process. And in a relatively short amount of time, they could see all of the layers of the skin form up until the dry layer, or the layer of dead skin cells on the top that we're all probably pretty familiar with. So I've talked a bit about how open source platforms can be used to democratize access to this technology. And while I've been at the Knight campus, I've been able to do a lot of work with that and also be exposed to the more industry level translational approach and see how we can really scale up our technologies to have a long-lasting impact in the world. And so Paul's going to come back and talk to you about all of that.
Thank you. Thanks. Actually, I completely forgot to mention this as well for tonight. So we have something like 20 3D printers in our lab. Most of them have been hacked and modified to be targeted towards research. And this is the power of open source printers. It democratizes access to this technology so more people can use it. But at the same time, not everyone wants or not everyone can build a printer from scratch. And so this is where, from the commercial side, it's just easier for researchers to buy scaffolds. And this is where Vivotex comes in. So together with a postdoc who came with me from Europe in 2021, we co-founded a UO startup called Vivotex, and we've industrialized the microfiber printing technology. We've had great support from ADEC. This is a world-leading, it's an Oregon family-owned company that's world-leading in dental equipment. And if you're in a dentist chair next time and they are shining that light in your mouth, have a look at that light and it's probably got the ADEC logo on it. And we're making scaffolds at scale for cell culture research to do things like eliminating animal testing and also improving the whole diagnosis and fabrication process. And not mentioning that Petri dishes are flat 2D surfaces and we're creating these three-dimensional scaffolds. And we make this at scale that anyone can purchase. But we're also sort of embracing trends of new technologies. What you're seeing here is something called volumetric printing. This was a technology invented at the Lawrence Livermore National Laboratories just over 5 years ago, and it makes objects in seconds. So together with the Lindbergh and the Willett labs, we've recycled bone fragments and incorporated in here so we can print bone parts in seconds. And it works in a similar way. It uses the mathematics that you have in CT scans and MRIs. So you have a rotating vial of a photoresin, and you're projecting light into it as it's turning. And what happens is the object cures all at the same time, and that's why you see it sort of suddenly appear. It looks like magic, but it's a wonderful technology to embrace. Also, we've been inventing new technologies here. So we're actively working in nanofiber 3D printing technologies, and these fibers are now pushing the 100 nanometer level, and they're about 1/200th the diameter of a human hair. So this is now at the scale of collagen. So if we're looking at recreating tissues, we now have this kind of building block where we can make more and more complex things. The first printer in the world was built at the Knight campus, and UO has secured the patents for this futuristic technology. So as the Dalton lab looks forward to 2035 and how things are made, imagine a clinic where a surgeon can print bone parts in seconds from your own cells, where imagine a spinal cord injury isn't a life sentence, or a brain tumor diagnosis a death sentence. Imagine over the next 10 years, as the Knight campus fills with more students and more researchers empowered to innovate and push their ideas into translation. And that's the future we're trying to develop, one fiber at a time. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Paul and Iman. Amazing stuff. Amazing. So, well, next, please welcome our next two speakers, Professor Keat Ghee and Dr. Kylie Williams. Let me tell you a little bit about both of them. One of the first faculty members to join the Knight campus, Professor Ong arrived in 2019 from Michigan Tech University, where he held an endowed professorship in technological innovations in health. His lab specializes in implantable sensors that measure physical forces inside the body and transmit real-time data using a technology similar to the RFID chip on your credit card. That work has evolved into smart implants that don't just monitor conditions in your body, but can adapt to them and improve treatment outcomes. Ghee has been recognized as a fellow of the National Academy of Inventors and has translated his research into a startup company called Pandaria Technologies that he founded right here in the Knight campus. The Pandaria is developing sensors for orthopedic surgeons, performing reconstructions, giving experts instant quantifiable data to complement their experienced hands. Now, joining Ghee will be Dr. Kylie Williams. Kylie is a true Knight campus trailblazer. She was the first graduate of our bioengineering PhD program, and I'm proud to say one of my first trainees in the Guldberg lab at the University of Oregon. From day one, Kylie helped shape what this campus has become. She served as the inaugural Chris Lee Innovation Fellow and helped formulate and complete the Entrepreneurship and Innovation specialization for non-MBA students through the Lundquist College of Business. This specialization, which I mentioned earlier, involves 5 MBA courses and is now offered to non-MBA students across the university. Her doctoral research, completed in 2024, focused on using implantable sensors to optimize recovery from serious bone injuries, and she now carries that work forward as Clinical Engineering Director at Pandaria Technologies. So please join me in welcoming Professor Keat Ghee and Dr. Kylie Williams.
Thanks, Bob. That was a great introduction. So I have a small favor to ask you. Can you take a moment and shake the hand of the person next to you? Let's just say a firm handshake. Let's try that. Shake hand, firm, okay? Say, on a scale of 1 to 10, 5 being the perfect firmness that you expect, 10 is like you just put your hand through a stone crusher, and 1 is like you're holding a limb rack. How many of you think that the handshake you had just now was too firm, 7 or above? Raise your hand. I see some of you think it's too firm. Don't be ashamed. I mean, it's okay. And how many of you think that the firmness is too little? It's like 3 or below. I see some of you have that. See, this is exactly my point. You expect a firmness, a firm handshake, but everybody's definitions and idea of firm is different. This is because everybody is unique. This type of unique or differences among the populations, although it's trivial in this handshaking exercise, can cause complications when you go through certain medical treatment. For example, let's think about surgery. When a surgeon is tightening a bone screw or tensioning or securing a suture, they ask the same question: how tight is right? Is my definition or perception of tightness aligned with this patient's need? Isn't it be nice if there's a way, is there technology out there who can tell the surgeon that answer? So this leads to a question: are there any technology out there who actually can tell the surgeons or doctors your body conditions when you go through a surgery or before you go through a procedure? In other words, are there any technology out there who can tell the doctor so that he or she can give you the perfect handshake? The answer is yes, there are actually. There are a lot of fancy machines, MRI, X-ray, blood analyzer. Those can give you great information. One thing that you might not realize is some of you probably have the device on you. I know that some of you probably have those Apple Watch, the smart device, or wherever that can track your heart rate, your daily activity, how well you sleep, or how not well you sleep. Those type of information, when you apply properly, give a wealth of information for the doctor to treat certain conditions. Although this type of wearable is very powerful, they have their limitation. One limitation is they are not that useful, or they have difficulty to implement when we are talking about surgery, especially when they have to work from inside the body. So folks, this is what my research is focusing on. I'm trying to borrow these wearables technical stuff, which is real-time tracking data, real-time transmitting data. I borrow the concept and make the wearable implantable. In other words, I use the functions going from outside the body to inside the body. So let's change gear a little bit. Let's talk about where I come from. Just like Paul, my journey is a long way to Oregon. I was born and raised in Penang, Malaysia. As you can see on the picture behind me, on the left side, there was a nice beach. Penang has a lot of nice beaches. No, the guy on the beach is not me. It looks like me, but I wish it was me, but it was not me. Right? But that baby, it is me. About 50 years ago. But I want to highlight the person that is holding that baby. It is my father. My father, which is still well right now, but he is never went to college. But he is a self-taught electrical engineer, and he is very handy. When I grew up in Malaysia, and the weather get too hot, and Malaysia is, weather get hot every single day. My father is very good at reading up, building all those, putting all those remote control, motion sensing and timer in all the fans around the house just to save electric bill. So when I was growing up, looking at what my father did, all this magic, I was like, wow, this is cool. I wanted to do that, even when I was very young age. I got my chance. About 10 years later, I flew across the globe to Kentucky, and I pursued my electrical engineer. And after that, I moved north to Michigan to start my academic career. When I was at Michigan, I have a lot of fun building different types of sensors. That's my passion, building sensors. I build sensors that can detect, for example, blood coagulation time. I have sensors that can detect endotoxin. I have sensors that can measure gastric pH. Heck, I even set sensors that can measure food freshness. I have sensors that can monitor beer fermentation. I know you like it, beer fermentation. And I have sensors, in this case, can measure concrete while it's curing. As you can see there, a lot of my work or my research is actually trying to solve medical problems. This is because there is always a need for precision medicine, and a lot of my technology fits very well. So I was at Michigan having fun, but I was also frustrated. One of the major frustrations is I felt that I was stuck in something we call the academic research loop. or research cycle. What I did was I write a proposal, get funding, do research, publish paper, repeat the process again and again. I felt like I do not have the time to actually jump out of the circle and then apply my technology in the real world, to real people, to have an impact. This is when I met Bob. Yes, this Bob, right? I remember he mentioned the visions of the night campus. He talked about, we want to do great science, but we want to do even greater impact. I was very intrigued. So I came to Oregon, Eugene, and Bob brought me to the building site of the night campus. Back then, it was just a giant hole on the ground. I was okay with that because I know that the giant hole will be a giant building one day. Right? Then Bob brought me to the Willamette, the walk bridge across Willamette River, just behind the night campus building. And all of you know that it was a very impressive river. For someone there who loved the fish, and I always know how to appreciate a good river. So back then, right there, I told Bob, okay, Bob, say no more. I'm so. Yeah. So here I am, folks. I've been here joining the UO night campus and here in Eugene doing the research that I love. The research I love is to develop wireless sensor, specifically for orthopedics, so they can tell the surgeons what happened to the body so that he can optimize the surgical outcome. This is what my sensor can do to help one of the orthopedic surgery, specifically ACL repair. So ACL is a ligament that helps stabilize the knee joint. When it tears, the surgeons typically do a repair called ACL reconstructions. What it does is it gets a tendon graft and then use that to connect the two bones and then to re-stabilize the knee joint again. The process is like this. They first drill holes through a tunnel, and then the tendon graft is passing through the tunnel. One end of the tendon graft is connected to the bone, the top bone, and then after they connect it, they pull the tendon with a certain tension and connect to the opening of the tunnel at the lower end of the bone. Now the knee should be stabilized. The key to success of this surgery is the tension of that tendon. If the tension is too tight, we over-constrain the knee joint. This is like just now when you ask for a firm handshake and you get a stone crusher. It is just too strong, too tight. It can cause the tendon to damage, and it can cause long-term destabilizing of the knee joint. On the other hand, if the tension is too low, the knee will still be wobbly and unstable. This is like when you're asking for a firm handshake, you get a limb drag, it just doesn't have enough force to stabilize to make the knee function again as usual. So those are not good either. So what my sensor does is it can tell the surgeons exactly what the tension is, so that as soon as they tie the suture, the tension is stay there. There's the perfect tension, the 5 in your handshake. We want that. In addition, after the surgery, you can also, the surgeon can, you jump already, but after the surgery, the surgeon can also continue detect the tension so that they can use the number as a biofeedback, because everybody have a different healing rate. Some heal faster, some heal later, and this tension can tell what the healing condition, and we can tell the physical therapists to readjust the physical therapy sessions during the rehab process. So the sensor that I built was developed at the University of Oregon Research Lab. In order to translate it to the clinical space, we still need to do a lot of work. We need to get, for example, FDA approval. That's a key part, right? FDA approval. We also need to do consistent manufacturing, quality management system. We also need to do a lot of market survey. We also need to talk to the surgeon so that they can incorporate our system into their workflow. All these things is beyond the scope of what the university lab can do. So that's why I co-founded a company called Pandera Technologies. We wanted the Pandera Technologies to continue to develop a sensor that is clinical ready and also a lot of commercialization stuff. A lot of this type of commercialization activity is difficult to get in other university, but at UO, at Night Campus, they actually encourage the faculty to explore that, to do that. So as you can see here, this is the blow-up image of the sensor that we built, the Pandera built. It is small, it's the RFID, like Bob said, it's like the credit card thing, yeah, the one you scan. If you see, look carefully in the picture here, it has a lot of electrical component. We have strain gauges, we have inductor, we have capacitor. All these things work together so that it can collect the tension data or tension information and send it wirelessly when it is being scanned by a reading device. What this sensor doesn't have is an internal battery. Because it doesn't have internal battery, it is designed to stay forever in the patient. The fact that it can stay forever in the patient is what makes this technology unique. This is the competitive advantage, because when you go through a surgery, you implant something, you don't want to go through another surgery to take it out again. There is a lot of complication, and who pay for that, right? So this is why we pursue this type of technology. So let's talk about Pandera. Pandera was formed in 2020 with 2 people, 1 part-time, 1 volunteer. I'm the volunteer. And then we have grown quite a lot since then. And that's what you see the picture. This is the latest picture of Pandera and friends. And we have grown to about 8 to 9 people. I still remember Pandera was sharing a couple of desks at the Night Campus incubator to where right now we are having our own personal commercial space with dedicated lab and testing facility. Remember I talked about FDA approval? Well, we are very lucky that we are very happy that FDA has designated our technology as something they call a breakthrough technology. This means that they deem that our technology has such a medical impact, they are willing to guide us through their approval process. Yeah. So doing this type of translation research taught me a lot of things. I learned that to translate something to clinic, science and technology is part of the equation only. I need to have a good execution, continuous funding, a great team, and for the company, I need to pay tax, a lot of taxes. Okay? So I know this is important for local economy, right? But one thing that I want to highlight is the ecosystem for startup is very important. We're talking about University of Oregon, Night Campus, Eugene, State of Oregon, and a lot of local and Oregon's business community. Without those things exist here, Pandera would not be able to grow to where it is right now. It will not be able to continue growing here. And of course, all these things cannot happen without the great people, the great team. Pandera and me, and here we are lucky enough to hire a lot of strong engineers from outside this region to the Oregon. We even have the CEO that we hire from outside Eugene to here. With these people, we can co-develop this technology. Now, another important part is, because of what we are doing, we are also able to retain great talent here at Eugene. I'm talking about great talent like Kylie Williams here, right? Kylie Williams, as mentioned, she is the first Night Campus PhD graduate. She joined the company about 2 years ago. Kylie is not only a great engineer, but she has a great understanding on the clinical side of our technology. With Kylie by my side, I'm very confident that we can translate this idea, this invention, to something in the clinic that will be useful. The invention and idea that was born here in Eugene, that will be continued developed here in Eugene. With that, please welcome Kylie.
Thank you, Dr. Ong. As the clinical engineering director for Pandera, I regularly interface with surgeons, and this is mainly to understand their need to make sure that our product is fulfilling that need while integrating into their existing workflow. For me, engagements can range from shadowing their surgeries to demoing our product or performing preclinical or clinical studies with our sensors. Throughout these engagements, I rely on my engineering training to describe our product, to troubleshoot it, and to be able to translate surgeon feedback into product specifications to ultimately bring those specs back to our team to drive product development. I can confidently say that I can fulfill this role right after my PhD in a startup environment because of the training I received at the Knight campus. I joined the Knight campus back in 2020, specifically the Guldberg lab, and this was after a previous graduate student developed this sensor at Georgia Tech with Dr. Ong's help. This sensor integrates with the plate used to stabilize the femur fracture, and it reads the strain along that plate throughout recovery. My job was to take that sensor and design clinically relevant experiments to understand the value of this sort of technology. For me, those experiments looked at external exercise conditions and how that impacts internal forces on the femur. And the hope is to use this information so physicians can prescribe patient-specific exercise aimed at improving bone healing. Throughout my time, I looked at several different exercise parameters, and I don't have time to go into all of them, but I'm going to focus on intensity as our parameter of interest. In this study, subjects had a fractured femur, and then they either underwent no exercise, low-intensity training, or high-intensity training. And throughout this study, we found that high-intensity exercise improved bone healing. As we can see in the graph, where on the right, or the high-intensity group, had the greatest regenerated bone volume. And although these results were promising, across several studies, we continue to notice that some subjects weren't responding well, even in the best healing group. And we can see that in that red box. This then led us to want to get tools to allow for patient-specific analysis to understand why are the majority of subjects responding well to one single exercise condition, while some aren't responding or healing at all. This then led to our sensor technology, where again, we understand how external exercise conditions impact the internal mechanical environment and thus healing. And we can see an example of this if we look at the healed versus the not healed subject from our high intensity group. Here we're looking at heat maps within the fracture region. And if we first focus on week 2 of the healed subject, we can see that the fracture had a high strain environment because red is indicating greater strains. Then we see that at week 4, that red disappears, showing that strain was decreasing over time for a femur that eventually goes on to heal by week 8. Then in the not healed subject, we can see that same high strain environment, or a lot of red, in the week 2 heat maps. But then we see that red stay, or that high strain stay throughout week 4 for a femur that eventually goes on to not heal at all by week 8. This information could be used in clinical practice by telling the physician that the top subject is ready to advance to high intensity exercise, since their strain is decreasing over time, indicating that healing is happening. This could allow patients to get back to their exercise, back to parenting, or back to work faster. This information could also tell physicians that the bottom subject is not ready for high-intensity exercise because their strains remain high, indicating that healing is not happening, and instead they might need biological support in order to promote healing. With current technologies in the clinic, the understanding of whether your patient is healing well or not typically takes 6 to 9 months. With our sensor technology, we can flag at-risk patients that might not heal well in the matter of weeks. Beyond my engineering training, I also was able to participate in several business opportunities while at the Knight campus. And again, I don't have time to go into all of them, but I'll highlight a couple. First, I was able to use Pandaria as a business case while completing 5 MBA courses through the Innovation and Entrepreneurship specialization. Then I was able to participate on and pitch on behalf of Pandaria at the Oregon Innovation Challenge, or University of Oregon's incubator and pitch competition. After these experiences, I was then hired on the leadership team at the Lundquist Entrepreneurship Center. And my role on this team was to continue to bridge the night campus with the business school to make sure that technical students after me continue to take advantage of these opportunities. Now, taking a step back, my time at the night campus all started because I simply said yes to my dad. I was home over spring break, my junior year from Whitman College, and he asked me to join him for a lunch and a seminar at Oregon State. As you can see, I've always been a daddy's girl, so that was an easy yes. Although I didn't know much about the seminar, I just knew it was something cool coming to Oregon. The seminar ended up being Guldberg talking about the night campus, using a personal story about his daughter. For those that attended his science night out, this may sound familiar. But for those that weren't there, he explained how his daughter, who was a state champion tennis player, underwent a spinal injury that required surgery. Their family thought they were through the worst of it after the surgery until his daughter rolled over in bed and snapped that spinal implant. This then required an additional surgery, and it restarted her timeline of recovery. Guldberg explained how this turning over in bed should never break a spinal implant. So he sought to do something about it. He founded Vertera Spine, which is a company that makes porous spinal implants that integrate better into the bone, minimizing the risk of breakage. Since then, this company has been acquired, and it highlights the entrepreneurial mindset that the night campus was built on. After hearing this seminar, like Ghee, I was sold. I knew I wanted to join an entrepreneurially focused engineering program that was only an hour away from my hometown. So I found Guldberg's email, reached out, and a couple weeks later, I was meeting him at the construction office that, like Ghee, oversaw the big hole in the ground. Had to envision a building there. More importantly, the decision to join the night campus and me being sold was because Guldberg's story hit close to home. When I was 11 years old, my family was told to start planning our funeral for my mom. Her body was fighting and losing a battle to pneumonia. Sorry. Wow, was not expecting to get choked up. I'm not normally a crier. Anyways, her body was fighting a battle with pneumonia. And for as long as I can remember, my mom's been sick with several incurable diseases, including gastroparesis, or a paralyzed stomach. Her inability to eat was impacting every aspect of her life, including her ability to fight an infection like pneumonia. Luckily, that day, the doctors decided to try one last antibiotic that worked. But they knew the fight was far from over. They needed to address the core problem of her inability to eat. The quest to solve this issue led to her getting a novel device implanted into her stomach. It was a gastric pacemaker that was implanted at OHSU. And this Medtronic device works very similar to a heart pacemaker, where it sends rhythmic jolts to the stomach, encouraging digestion when food is present. As one of 6 children, I witnessed how a single innovative technology impacted the lives of many. And now, 17 years later, my mom is still with us. In fact, she's here today. And she has the ability to eat 1 to 2 meals a day, which was unheard of back 17 years ago. So with her ability to eat, she had more energy to raise all 6 of us kids. She actually got us all successfully out of the house. But now she has the added mission of helping raise 7 grandchildren, including my 9-month-old son, Nash, or the chunk sitting there. This whole experience started my fascination with medical devices, but it wasn't until I met Guldberg that I knew how to take a fascination into a career with the opportunity to impact many others. That career started in 2020 when I joined the night campus as one of 6 in the first cohort of the PhD bioengineering program. I was then the first graduate from this program. In fact, I was the first UO student to graduate with an engineering degree. And now I am one of 8 at Pandaria Technologies, the first spin out from the night campus. But beyond all these firsts, nothing beats the opportunity to pursue my dreams while staying close to home. Opportunities that are made possible because of the growing biotech ecosystem here in Oregon, led by trailblazers like the Night Campus in Pandaria. Thank you.
We're in the Q&A period now. I'm going to start with a question for Iman and Paul. And it's amazing how you guys have taken a technology and you're making impact in two different ways, right? You know, doing the open source, which I think everybody's familiar with that sort of software, but doing it with hardware is kind of novel and new. And then making a company, which you have to do to get FDA approval, as you talked about, and get it in. Is there any tension in between those two things? In the one sense, you're giving things away free, and the other ones, you're selling them. You know, do you ever run into where there's a tension between those two sides of the impact?
Kylie? I mean, the short answer is yes. But I think that it is not necessary, I guess. There can be, I mean, they serve different purposes in my eyes, at least. We use this open source platform to really accelerate the innovation that's happening and try new things and break things faster and take steps forward. But ultimately, like, you do need IP in this world. We do need IP. We do need companies. We do need those resources to really have a broad impact later down the road in a translational application. So I see the benefits of both, and I think where they interface can be challenging. It has been challenging, but as long as everyone remembers that, like, they have their respective roles and there's a lot of communication involved in trying to work more together than fight, then I think it can be advantageous for both parties.
Awesome.
Do you have anything you'd like to add?
I think it's about accessibility. You know, I just want people to be able to try out and test this technology in whatever application they need to use it in. And, you know, I think open source printers, like you said, you can break it fast, you can modify it, and you're just doing completely different things. And in a way, for people to get in the entry level, it could be through trying to build your own printer, or you get a scaffold that you buy. But, you know, we don't necessarily just sell a scaffold. We sell like hundreds and thousands of scaffolds. So it's a completely different thing.
I'm going to stick with you guys because there's one from the audience here that's also a microfiber question. So I see your microfiber printer can build scaffolding at a neuron scale. Are you aware of any work being done to build scaffolding that can be used to regenerate or repair Alzheimer's? The damage to the brain caused by Alzheimer's?
No. I think you also have to match the technology to the application that you want. And, you know, we make certain things and then we try and apply them where there's a natural fit. I think Alzheimer's and the sort of the physiology of the disease is very hard to, you know, introduce 3D printing into that. But, you know, we have, like, everyone in the lab is thinking through, like, could we use it for this? Could we use it for that? And so in a way, we're upside down, where we're making these new things and saying, well, what can we use it for? Yeah, sometimes it just doesn't fit certain applications, and sometimes it does.
But you wonder if you might use it, because one of the things you can do with this is creating human model systems outside the body, right? And potentially testing Alzheimer treatments.
Absolutely, yeah. I was thinking about, like, direct in vivo implantation.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I think that's where the boundaries of, like, what you can do in science is it's grey, right? You can be doing things at the cell culture level, and you can be doing things at the implantable level. And I think you can gain a lot of knowledge from both of those.
What's amazing is you guys have been pushing the boundaries of the materials. The bioprinting of cells has also been advancing, where we can now print cells one cell at a time. And in the cancer world, for example, you can actually print a copy of a person's tumor like all the morphology, everything, cell by cell, and then test a whole bunch of different drugs rather than making the patient go through that one by one. So it's really amazing the advancements that have happened. Kylie, this is a question for you. So you did a lot of stuff, a lot of firsts, a lot of stuff during your graduate school. And a lot of times historically there's sort of been a divide between science and business. So first of all, how did you have time to do all that? And and how do you, what would your advice be to other young people who are interested in science and entrepreneurship?
Yeah, the time was tight, but we made it work. Advice that I would give someone in general, I always say just do it. And I know that's cliche coming from Oregon with Nike, but it's true. Just do it. And if there's an opportunity in front of you, go try it out. Maybe you end up liking business more than the engineering or vice versa. But I think there's just such value in multidisciplinary approach to anything. Solving a problem is hard if it's a problem worth solving. And you need a creative way to attack it. You need multiple angles to try to attack any complex problem with. And getting business and engineering, that gives you more angles to start to solve problems. So I would just really encourage you to do it and embrace the hard.
All right, this is one for both teams. Where do the names Pandaria and Vivatex come from?
So Pandera is actually a Malay word, means sensors. As you can see, that what we do is sensors. So Pandera is Malay for sensors. That's where I came from.
Wait, but who came up with the name?
I was afraid that you're not going to ask it. You came up with that. In fact, I left Malaysia for way too long. I forgot what Pandera meant. And then you sent me email, hey, you should use Pandera. I said, Bob, what does it mean? And you said, you said, oh, it's Malay word. Then I had to go to Google. And then, yeah, Google told me that, yeah.
A funny story based off of that. I was actually on the phone with a surgeon yesterday, and they asked where Pandaria came from. Then I explained it to them, and they go, that's great. That's going to be my fun fact for every cold icebreaker that I need to do. So even they appreciated it.
And I have a short answer. It was ChatGPT.
All right. Kylie and Ghee, could you talk about some other use cases? So ACL you talked about. Are there some other use cases that you're thinking about for this technology?
Yeah, with Ghee's expertise on sensors for anything, we of course have multiple applications we can go after. ACL we talked about. Others include shoulder or rotator cuff tears and reading tension with that sensor. We also have ankle syndesmosis, again, reading tension across that suture that's stabilizing the two bones in the ankle. And then we also have fracture or trauma applications that are based off of my PhD, where it's a sensor along that metal plate used to stabilize fractures anywhere, but initially we're starting with femur fractures.
I think this one is for Paul and Iman. As a former dialysis nurse, I'm very interested in the development of artificial fistula graft materials for dialysis access. Is there any microtech for this area? I guess that could be for either team.
I'm not that familiar with the needs, but I think we look at everything. I'll probably be Googling it tonight when I get home. Well, I think one of the things because we print 1/10 of a teardrop per hour. We don't make a lot of it, and so I suppose you need like meters and meters of this in a scale up. So, but I'll definitely check it out.
There could be, yeah, somewhere there could be 3D print happening, and they're like, okay, this is our intended application. But Paul's right that scaling it up is a challenge. And I just want to highlight that there are other forms of high resolution fabrication that we use in the lab, like electrospinning, which actually creates a more membrane-like material at a much faster rate than the actual printing. So even if the microfiber printing itself isn't ideal for that application for whatever reason, we're also able to create these porous structures in other ways. So I think it's definitely worth us Googling later, and hopefully it is being examined somewhere.
Here's a non-science question. Has the state of Oregon provided a positive environment to start your new businesses and to keep your new businesses in Oregon? And maybe as an add-on, what more could be done?
I mean, we have an Oregon family company that has really been incredible. ADEC has been incredible for supporting us, and I mean, the people in Oregon are just so wonderful. Like I have this professorship by a lovely couple who have donated their money for my research. We're in the Night Campus, in the Pape Innovation Center, and now we have the ADEC, which is the Austin Parish family. So, I mean, I'm not thinking about the government side of things, but actually the people are just incredible, and so yeah, that would be my immediate answer.
Yeah, just about what Paul said. I mean, I do see that Oregon start to shift. I mean, to the better. I do start to see that Oregon start to more and more focusing on how to develop and cultivate our ecosystem in terms of startup. I think that Oregon start to feel that we do not want to be the middle child between Washington and California anymore. I have to admit that before. I had to admit that before I came to UO for this job, I never stepped in Oregon. I was in Washington and California. The only Oregon I knew was the Oregon Trail. You know those games, that old game. That's the only thing I know, right? So, but as I stay here for 6 years, I've been here for 6 years. I start to see the culture shift. And I'm very happy to what we're starting to do. And more important thing is, I start to see that more and more people, the leadership at Oregon, start to listen to what we are saying. So start to understand and then put the next challenge that we are facing and make that as a priority for how to shift the policy, how to make it better. And I think that is much more important than, we are at a very high bar and going down. I like to be keep moving up. I think that's what I start to feel.
I have to say, from my perspective, here a little longer, and it does feel like there's been a shift, and it's so important because I can't tell you the number of students we have graduating who come to Oregon. They want to stay in Oregon. They want to live here. They want to work here. They want to pay taxes. Maybe they don't want to pay taxes, but they want to be in Oregon, and it's up to us to create opportunities for great students like Kylie and Iman to stay here. All right. Back to science. How does the immune system deal with rejecting or accepting a 3D printed material?
Well, I think for any material, basically the body just kind of walls it off a little bit, right? So I think for your implant, you have this fibrous capsule, which, the body, it's not really biocompatible, it's tolerated. The body says, okay, that's all right. With some of the scaffolds that we're making, because the porous cells are really growing in, and we're still trying to learn, because the scaffolds that we're making, no one else has really investigated, like, how does the body react to this? And so, and there's and the body reacts different parts, to different things and different sizes, different materials. So that's still uncharted waters. And the microfiber printing is kind of distinct to other 3D printing technologies. It's kind of at the size of the cell, whereas most 3D printing technologies are either much bigger or much smaller. And so this is still to be discovered.
Okay, so I'm definitely not an immunology expert, but I have some things to say here. I like what Paul's saying about how most materials are biotolerable. They don't like other things invading their space, but some things are tolerated more than others because they're relatively inert, like titanium or the polymers that we commonly print with. When we have stitches and they're degrading over time, doesn't mean that our cells love them, but they're small enough, and the degradation products of it are cleared fast enough that we're not like developing a scar necessarily around it. So it's about balancing all of these factors, and we're definitely doing ourselves a favor by working at such a small scale. We'll see more scarring or more of those fibrous capsules like when you're implanting things at a larger scale. So by using these highly porous structures, we're trying to minimize that, and also hopefully printing with a material that they actually like attaching to, like silk, which I mentioned.
I got one last question. I unfortunately couldn't get to all of them. They keep coming in. It was great. Thank you so much for all your questions tonight. But this is a really good one that came in, and I'm going to build on it. So a common theme between both of you was you're making stuff really small, right? Do you see a world where you could combine what Pandaria is doing with what Vivatex is doing? Maybe you're making skin that's got implantable sensors that can actually feel, what's the limits of what you guys are doing?
It's like they're the obvious responders. But I do want to just throw out that there is work being done on printing with more electroactive or piezoelectric materials for later sensor applications. So while there's not a clear idea in my head, there actually is a lot of interest in moving towards sensors as one of the branches for our technology.
Iman she's saying exactly what I say. I mean, if you look at the technology that we have without internal battery, then how do we get the power? All we did was electromagnetic coupling. It's all electromagnetic energy go there to interact with those. So if you can 3D print in a very controlled way with conductor, non-conductor with a very unique pattern, we make that structure into a sensor. So if we can actually couple with those things, we can actually create a true smart skin or smart bone, everything that can have both functions that have mechanical, biological, and sensing function combined together. Those are not easy, but if we can do it, that is the next stage of artificial fixing of our body.
As long as I've known Ghee, he never says he can't do something. He can always do it.
Actually, I just wanted to mention some recent research that we just submitted where we're actually printing our fibers core shell. So like these fibers that are like 5 microns in size have a central part and a core. And one of our ambitions is to make small wires from that. This is probably news to you, Ghee, but we have published together, and we want to do more. But to be able to make wires down to like 5 microns and make them, you can be wrapping kilometers in like a very small space. And I think that's where a lot of the technology is going, where you have something that is small but has power that you would normally expect from something that's much bigger.
All right, we've unfortunately run out of time.
Yay.
And to everyone here tonight, thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thanks for all your questions. We'll see you next year.